Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As you are trickling in, it's my pleasure to introduce my panelists in no particular order. Mr. C. Velan, Executive Director and CEO of TRIL. Mr. C. Venkat Vishwanathan, Founder and Chairman of Latent View Analytics Private Limited. Mr. Murugavel Janakiraman, CEO and Founder of Bharat Matrimony. Mr. Siddharth Purohit, CTO of IBM India Software Labs. And Mr. Ashish Dikshit, Sifi Technologies. Okay, so it's going to be an interesting afternoon. I was told almost always the session immediately after lunch is always given to the most interesting topic. So, because it needs to keep people awake. So this is a topic that has kept people awake for many days and nights, many months in fact. Many of us are scared as to what this will do to our businesses. Many of us are so happy that it has changed our businesses, then also we don't sleep. So maybe this is the right topic to have immediately after lunch when people are feeling a bit drowsy after that nice lunch. The topic that we have today, ladies and gentlemen, for the next few minutes that we are going to discuss is about digital business and technologies, particularly with reference to taking the Make in India campaign going digital. So we're going to talk about how digital technologies is going to impact some of our businesses, some of our traditional ones, some of our newer ones, and how that is going to change the way business is being done in this country. Let me start with a couple of thoughts that come to my mind. I think gone are those days where we think technology is an enabler or technology is something that is going to support my business. It's a department of my company, it's a back office and things of that kind. Technology and especially the digital formats have come here to stay as a big game changer of business. The digital campaign, the digital media or the digital format has changed the way business is being done. In many cases, it has defined how business is done. There are products that have evolved riding on the digital wave. There are customer segments that are being found and approached using the digital products and channels. And soon, there are going to be newer businesses that get formed only because of this campaign. This is what is happening with the digital technologies. So we are going to discuss here about how these digital technologies have been disrupted, how they are changing, and some of our fears. We are actually going to share some of our fears that is happening because of digital technologies encroaching us. The good news for me is that we have some very eminent panelists, many of them affected by, or all of them affected by the digital technologies, and they are going to share their experiences. So we are not going to have any PowerPoint presentation or wild statistics thrown at you. We're just going to talk about our experiences, particularly with respect to what is called as the SMAC world, where you have many things that are affecting us from the digital workers. First to go, I invite my good friend, Mr. Velan, who his business is one of those traditional businesses. And there are many things that digital technologies do to new businesses. We thought we'll start with somebody who's been in a business that we thought is not affected by digital technologies and what are his experiences in that.
I belong to a traditional industry which is a construction sector, which is real estate and infrastructure sector. To start with, one of the interesting things which is happening in the recent past is that buying of your apartments or houses. Even our own group company, today, you could have seen a week back, you can book an apartment through online and all informations are provided over there. Earlier, we used to visit, select with family and then we used to go far. Today, you can even visually see the progress of the project by sitting in US. The days are changing. And I was just discussing with my chair. He was highlighting one of the information which is very interesting. Even people have data to that extent of how many projects you have done and where and all you have found so many mistakes, and are you out of those mistakes today. To that extent, data can be processed and analyzed. Yes, coming back to this main subject, I belong to that infrastructure industry. Today, the customer is the focus for any industry. The customer's expectations are to be dealt with. Then only the business is going to be successful. If you look at it, in our industry, pertaining to the demand for this digital, right from construction commencement, it is required. For example, we design the building and share the designs, not necessarily across the table, we share through intranet. Then when you get into the construction phase, the progress of the constructions through, you can just fix the cameras at various locations and cover it up and send it through internet and reaches various locations. The progress review is done in that manner. Sales and marketing, when you come to that stage, I happen to work with a big group where we have just finished about 3.4 million square feet of office space operational, of which about 1.2 million square feet was done through online. No visits happen. Means, to that extent, we can able to feed the data, informations, so the customer is satisfied and just going ahead with the signing of the deals. When it comes to the operational front, all the 3-4 phases I am talking about, you need to have integrated building management system, which is a kind of a system provides complete both monitoring and control of various services. Suppose you need a person's access into the campus like a CCTV system, you can able to monitor his movement, vehicle, anything for over 30 days of storage also. You can operate the campus like air conditioning system, lighting system, lift system with respect to automation. Again, it is with respect to digital. Coming to any kind of complaints or some sort of requirements of any help, it's again through online. In the recent past, you could have seen there are 100 smart cities are going to be developed as a first phase development, which the current government has announced. One of the major factors that is being focused is digital focus, digital technology focused, network, support. All data is available in the system format, no need for people to run around. And all kinds of requirement, emergencies, fire, security at one point of call or one point of contact. All those things are possible today because of this innovative approaches. I'm being from the sector which is not realistically from current technology sector, but how this is being used in traditional sector is what I am trying to say. Without technology today, nobody can able to even move around. That is what the situation today. With respect to the business potential, I was just highlighting, today we are importing lots of equipment, so many things, but because of the exorbitant growth potential with respect to real estate, residential, even one more thing I want to share, we have one more system in residential development. You can operate from your office, even the monitoring of the house. You can switch on, switch off the air conditioners, everything from sitting in your office. To that extent, the system is being developed or it is already in place. Going forward, it is going to be definitely very must in every kind of traditional industry, right from construction or operating or service sector in terms of real estate. I'll just stop at this level and I'll just answer in case any clarifications are there in the next rounds. Thank you very much.
So thanks for sharing your perspective, especially the fact that you're closer to your customers because of technology, and that is creating a lot of difference in the way business is being done. So thank you so much. So I didn't have a formal introduction because if you want to know more about Vedan, you can turn to page 38, you have more information about Vedan. So the next on the panel, we turn into somebody who's creating, who's actually making these changes happen. We're talking to somebody who is the Chief Technology Officer of the labs where the innovation is happening, of a pioneer in technologies which is IBM. So it's my pleasure to introduce Siddharth, who's going to talk about how solutions are being created, or the reason why we are talking here is because of what they invented. He's going to share his perspectives on it. Siddharth.
Thanks. Where I'll start with is, as all of us know, that this whole confluence of what Narayan talked about as SMAC or CAMS, right, which is that you add Internet of Things to that. This whole confluence is disruptive to where we are today, right? That whole industry. And our take is that we haven't even seen the beginning of it. I mean, you don't even know what kind of platforms are going to come out of this one, right? All this confluence that's happening. So what I'll do is I'll kind of talk about each one and what we are doing in that space. To kind of level set the audience, and then I'll also give you the relativity to the business itself. And I'll take specific examples on things like artificial intelligence and stuff like that. So from a cloud perspective, the way to look at cloud is you got to look at three things. You got to look at the business angle of the cloud. You got to look at how clouds are hosted, right? And the consumption, how do you consume the cloud? So from a business angle, there are three kinds of folks typically who leverage cloud. One is the optimizers. So they leverage cloud to make their companies a lot better, a lot efficient. So if you put all your servers, virtualize them, and consolidate them, you immediately get 80% efficiency, right? And you save money. That's a given. I mean, anytime you move, you will save money. So these are the optimizers, right? Then there are innovators on the cloud. So they'll use cloud to enhance or value add some of their services, right? So they build an application, they leverage something else, and you kind of innovate your business model existing. And then there are disruptors. These are the companies that are born on the cloud, right? The WhatsApp of the world, for example, or Facebook, right? Which are the companies that are born on the web. They don't own infrastructure, right? They leverage it from any of the infrastructure providers, right? Like an Amazon, right? Or Google and things like that. And they create large business models, right? Or disruptive business models. So that is the cloud space. And what we do in that space is we've got infrastructure as a service, right? Like Amazon, which is known as SoftLayer, where WhatsApp runs. We got platform as a service like Bluemix, where you can build applications or you can leverage this. And the reason I bring that up is today there is no difference between two developers working out of a garage and a Fortune 500 company with this whole advent of cloud. Because cloud, if you look at it, it is just how do you leverage your compute, your storage, and your network, right? And you're renting this space. So if you are two people, before it used to be, if you needed 5 servers, you didn't have the capital to invest, right? To get these 5 servers and then host, let's say, 500 users. The reason WhatsApp succeeds so much with 50 people is they did not own any infrastructure. So there was no capital expenditure at all. And today, you are at a stage where you can leverage 100 servers, 1,000 servers, right? 2,000 servers from any one of the cloud providers for cents to $1. So that is what has changed. So which means you are seeing these newer business models coming up very fast, right? Companies like WhatsApp who command like 19 billion with 50 people, right? Without any infrastructure, so to say, that they own per se. So that is a big disruption from a cloud perspective. And the way you consume cloud, right? People will talk about like public clouds, private clouds, hybrid clouds, right? And things like that. And we will talk a little bit more about that if you have any questions around that. If I go into the analytics space, right, then we do analytics, everything from public safety. So right now, if you look at any of the police stations or any of the cops, either in major markets or in growth markets, they use analysis to catch criminals, right? So we've got a set of products that will allow you to trace calls, right? That will allow you to figure out who is calling whom, right? If a person is doing a missed call only and like there is a group of people that are calling this particular person, you can identify those out of 1 million call records, right? And there are cases where the cops have actually caught criminals just based on that. So they can analyze from a tower about million, 2 million, 3 million call records, right? And identify like 10 people who are out of pattern or are an anomaly, right? That where everybody is kind of calling them, they are calling nobody. So you kind of know that, look, that guy is a little bit of a kingpin type person, right? Then there are people who will only do missed calls, things like that. So analytics helps in that, right? So for public safety, we've got this. Then you talk about mobile. And mobile, while we have platforms and things like that, mobile is the biggest disruptor in these new business models, in the way people are growing, in the way people are leveraging this technology to improve healthcare, to improve education. So this is probably one of the biggest things. We can't even imagine where the mobiles will take us, right? So this is a device that is probably more powerful currently than the devices that sent, I guess, Apollo up to the moon. So that is the mobile part of it. Then you talk about social, right? You can analyze social sentiment from a web, either about a company or about a product, and you can target marketing to kind of counteract that. So for example, if you are looking at analysis between company A and company B on Twitters, Facebooks and things like that, you can figure out that this company is good or people like them only because of the price, or this company people like them only because of the quality. And then you can, as a company, you can counteract those kinds of things, right? So you can figure out why this particular product is selling more, and then you can put your strategy in place to kind of counteract that. So those kinds of things are possible when you talk about social or leveraging social data like the Twitters or the Facebooks or the one. Where I want to spend a bit of time is on where these things are going. So if you really look or hear all the industry pundits, or if you look at what the other companies are doing, this amount of data, it is humanly impossible to make sense out of it, right? Which means machine learning or artificial intelligence is going to play an extremely critical role as we go forward. And if you look at things like what Google does, right, in the artificial intelligence space or machine learning space, how much investments they've made in terms of robots and things like that. If you look at what Apple is doing with the Siri product or the Nuance technologies, if you look at what Microsoft is doing with Cortana and things like that, you'll kind of get an idea of where that is moving. IBM, for its part, we have invested quite a few $1 billion in this product called Watson. So Watson is, again, machine learning, but it is known as cognitive intelligence, right? So this is a system that can perceive, right? That can think for you, that can advise you, that can read through for example, about 200 million pages in 3 seconds, right? And understand them, not just read them. So this is kind of different between what a typical search we are used to doing, right? Which is a syntactic search, right? You just look for keywords and then you hit a thing. This thing actually understands what it's reading. So we got, and we are doing this in, let's say, healthcare is one of our primary pillars because that is helping humanity. So we are working with Memorial Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research and Cleveland Clinic and folks like those. And we have created this product called Watson Discovery Advisor. It's just one of the products out of this Watson group of products that allows or guides a physician in terms of cancer treatments. And to give an example, currently, like when typical physicians, probably if you go a decade or a couple of decades back, used to read from the books, right? And then they had like 4 or 5 types of cancers or breast cancer, right? And the therapies that are related to that, there were probably about 4 or 5. Currently, they are dealing with about 800 different kinds of treatments for 80 different kinds of breast cancers on 50 different types of tumors, right? And you got this whole Internet of Things that is writing journals and things like that. How does the physician typically ingest this data and make some sense out of it? So products like Watson help the physician identify. So not only will it look at what is all the data available in the world, right? If there is research that's happening in Dublin, right? If somewhere else, so it will figure out what are all these recent research articles. It will read that. It will look at the patient's history, right? Which is contextual, so it just doesn't do it on anybody else. It will look at the exact specific patient history. It will refer to the journals of medicine or the trusted sources of data, and then give you a view on what are the top 3 treatment options with probability, right? And this helps the physician. So what the guy who was leading Memorial Sloan Kettering, which has probably got the 1,000 of the best cancer physicians who treat about 125,000 cancer patients, right? He was talking about this and saying that Watson can advise me what 3% of the top physicians of the world will advise. So imagine now leveraging this particular thing in a growth market country like in India or China or in Africa, right? Where you don't now need to go to this top of the top cancer research institutes and ask them. Watson is right there and it advises the physician, and the physician has a chance to look at the options and do this. So these kinds of things are very disruptive, right? In terms of technology, how digital technologies are playing or helping us get there. The last thing I want to talk about is the Internet of Things. So now you may be hearing a lot about what Internet of Things are doing. And that is another wave that we haven't even seen what it is going to do, like mobile. How is it going to impact the supply chains that we have, the way we live our lives, right? How do we optimize what we do? Typically in any of the manufacturing that will be taking on as India. So a lot of things that are happening, so there's a big confluence, and we just need to be aware of it, and you guys are all academicians, so we just need to step on it and get on it. Thanks,
Siddharth. Really interesting. You started with cloud as a leveler, and increasingly you scared all of us a lot. I'm just worried if somebody or something can actually read 300 million pages in 3 seconds. And understand it also, which is the most toughest part, what will happen to us. And the last one you said is even more scary. If there is somebody who can diagnose things and advise people, if there are any doctors sitting around here, they will be scared. If there is somebody who is actually going to give a run for their money. But it's very interesting, and this is going to be there, and it is definitely going to change the way we are doing things. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. In case you want to know more about Siddharth, turn to page 33 and you will have more information about him. Thank you so much. Now we are turning to someone who I always admired as somebody who has been riding the digital wave, caught it early on. And if there are any of you, I see a lot of youngsters who are in that age of about to get married and other stuff. You can't miss this guy. It's my pleasure to introduce Murugavel Janakiraman, founder of Bharat Matrimony, to share his thoughts in terms of how digital technologies has been a prime reason and a prime mover of what he is doing in his business.
Okay, thank you. It's a good afternoon. So, probably we have to start using Watson to recommend prospect whom to they get married to. Because it's one of the biggest challenges people have, whom to get married to. While use IBM product, use the analytics to help people to find out who could be the best possible matches based on machine learning. Because you look at the past contact history of the people, what kind of prospect contact, what kind of prospect, then you automatically recommend. Because people have the problem of selecting who is the right prospect. So they sold some product, but they did not tell about the Watson product. So I want to catch this guy. So it's our journey for 15 years. It's constant innovation and constant adaptation of technology, because it was an accidental discovery for me. Almost 15 years ago. We're going to complete 15 years in next couple of months. While running a community site, figured out an opportunity in the matrimony space. It was just 2 page. 1 page for brides, 1 page for grooms. While initially it was more towards an opportunity, we got into that space. Over a period of time, the realization was how to bring the real-time or real-life matchmaking experience into the virtual world. Well, initially it's more like a putting a profile and contacting each other. Then we realized what are things is happening in the real world when it comes to the matchmaking. How to adapt those things into the online. Obviously, the horoscope was one of the important thing. We said, okay, horoscope based on time of birth and place of birth. In Bharat Matrimony, people can enter the time of birth, place of birth. Then you can generate a horoscope according to the language of preference and different format. There is South Indian format, North Indian format, East Indian format. It's not only generation of horoscope, it's also the matching of the horoscope. Because in my marriage, while I like I met my wife through BharatMatrimony.com. I like the girl. My father-in-law very particular. Sorry, I'm not going to allow you to talk to her until the horoscope is match. I have to wait for the horoscope result to come. So they said, look, now it's not the case anymore. Like, well, you enter the horoscope, the automatic shows whether horoscope matching or not. So you don't worry about whether contacting someone, the letter coming to know that, sorry, horoscope is not matching. So in my case, luckily it matched. So today in Bharat Matrimony, we generate horoscope, it automatically shows whether the horoscope is matching or not matching. So that you brought online. We also realized the reference, one of the things happening in the matchmaking. While you like the prospect, obviously you want to do the reference check. Again, a very difficult thing, like asking a prospect, can I talk to? Once you like the boy or girl, asking the reference is a very challenging thing because you like the person, at the same time it will be like uncomfortable asking, can I talk to someone, relatives or friends to know more about you? He said, look, it's something important because I definitely want to know more about it. Like the same way my father-in-law want to know more about me. We thought how to bring that online. We created a feature called Matrimony Reference Feature, where you can add your colleagues, relatives, and friends to come and write about you. The people who want to know more about you, they can get in touch with the other person. So that feature got added. Then we thought, okay, wouldn't it be nice to listen to the prospect voice? We launched a voice matrimony feature. We tied up with Airtel, where prospect can record a voice message. You call the Airtel number and listen to voice message. And people are not using it. We thought it's a paid service. That's why people are not using it. Then we say introduce a free toll-free number. Call the number, record the message. People can listen to the message. And still people are not using it, taken off the service. Because we realize that people, when come to expressing, people are not that comfortable. Similarly, we launched a video matrimony where people can record the video and put it on the website. It did not pick up. I'm talking about 7-8 years ago. We thought people didn't have the video camera at that point of time. Then we set up a video camera across our offices. Still did not happen. Again, the same realization that people are not, come on, the screen to talk about what kind of bride or groom they're expecting. Then other thinking was, everybody has a dream, boy or girl in their mind. Someone want to get married, like probably Aishwarya Rai. That's one Aishwarya Rai. We thought, but we can look like people like Aishwarya Rai. What are the dream boy or girl whom are thing? We said we introduce a feature where upload your dream boy or dream actor, actress, whoever it is. Then the site analyze all the pictures and get the similar looking brides or grooms. I find it so good. Can we have some dream girl, a dream boy, upload that picture, at least bring the similar matching profile. Then this feature was introduced, one guy upload a monkey picture and it thrown some matching process. I said, looks a dangerous feature to have taken off that feature. So like that, we kind of, then SMS came, we thought, okay, that, one point of SMS, the short code become very popular. We thought, okay, let's allow people to find a life partner through short code. We got a short code 50-50. Then people can send SMS, then get the matching result. Again, that service did not become successful. The thing was the constant endeavor of how to bring what other people look for in real life. Then we thought again, a lot of unstructured data. People enter so much information and description. The structured data like your education, occupation, certain things are structured data. Unstructured data, the people enter the description. And again, there are people who are different expert. I want a homely girl. We can't ask the girl while putting information whether homely girl, but again, based on unstructured data, we can able to cull out those information. The system automatically shows those information, converting unstructured data into structured data, so people can able to find life partners. So someone looking for, I want a homely girl and God-fearing, like that, same thing, kind of the boys who are jovial or humorous. So we have added that feature. Then the constant question was asked to me was, how the growth of social networking sites, because social networking tomorrow, would that be of threat to BharatMatrimony.com? We said, look at how to leverage the social networking to enrich bharatmatrimony.com. What we done was, because Bharat Matrimony, the information given is static information, which is, come and create a profile, which is very static. On other end, social networking is a dynamic information. We say, wow, leverage that information to enrich. So in Bharat Matrimony, if you give your a Facebook ID, it gets your hobbies and interests, and also tells whether how and your prospect, whether you are mutual friends. So basically use Facebook to show whether your mutual friends, how you and your prospect are matching in hobbies and interests. Same thing, LinkedIn information which you give, which talked about how the career has progressed, because in Bharat Matrimony you enter with the current destination. It doesn't talk about how your career has progressed. Which you give LinkedIn ID, you can able to pull out your past information, how your career has progressed. Then you have a Twitter information also. Give Twitter ID, it brings all your tweets. So basically leverage social networking site to, one thing, enhance at the same time to bring that commonality between the bride and the groom. So that feature got added. Then while it's on all the things were done on Bharat Matrimony, now use IBM Analytical. Last year we tried with IBM. We analyzed a lot of information because one upon a time the size was a challenge. Size was a challenge, we have limited number of profiles. Today's size is a challenge because you have 2.5 million members. How to match the right prospects? You use a lot of analytics to bring the best match based on what we think the appropriate match. Because sometimes people will not. Because I may say I want any degree, but based on his profile information, we know this guy is engineer. He probably most inclined towards engineer prospect. Why did I mention any degree is okay? Like that we look at whether tier 1 boys, tier 2, various information. Now the mobile is another big thing happening. That the apps and all the things. We adapted matrimony to the mobile platform. Today more than 1 million apps have been downloaded. That's another challenge. We are out to kind of mobile only users. There are hybrid users. Basically thing is about the constantly leverage a changing technology to make the matchmaking kind of the best platform for people to find the life partner. Apart from this online thing, we also, there are other services which have launched, assisted matrimony, which is technology plus human intervention. People who cannot, are busy with, not able to spend time taking the life partner, who can use our relationship manager service. We could able to find the best match based on their expectation. That's assisted matrimony service. We launched Elite Matrimony again, human plus technology got leverage. Plus your retail presence across India, where people can walk into the retail outlet, avail and our matchmaking services. So it's basically continuously leveraging technology to help people to find that their soulmate and help them to lead a happy married life. Thank you.
Thanks, Murugavel. That was a really interesting, very interesting account of what you did. But what I found very inspiring is in this new wave or new age, what is scary is that the entry barriers are so low, so somebody can actually come and do what you've been doing because, like Siddharth said, it's a leveler. Everybody can get it. Like, your money or anything else, no investment is a criteria. So I'm amazed at the interventions, which is innovations that Murugavel has done. Like I noted some of them I had missed. It started from horoscope matching to, a matrimony reference find that you can find, to a voice and video upload, to finding an ideal suitor. I mean, I'm married now, like I wish these things were there earlier. Finding an ideal suitor. Unstructured data. How do you find the ubiquitous homely wife? Interesting. And then the dynamic data to assisted matrimony. And when I was talking to him in the break sometime back, he's got 2-3 up his sleeve already, which is again going to disrupt or reinvent what he's been doing. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing with us how digital technologies have helped your business. So we're now turning to another innovator, founder, and somebody who's been riding one aspect of digital technology in a very big way. It's my pleasure to introduce Venkat, who's the chairman and founder of Latent View, which works big time in analytics, and he's going to share his view of how analytics is going to change the way business is being done. Thanks, Venkat.
Thank you. I'm just going to borrow this. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I think already the earlier speakers, Murugavel as well as Siddharth, have touched upon the technological changes and the newer opportunities that are there in analyzing data that is being generated by various businesses. I think analytics is primarily a profession where we are trying to make sense of data. And what has happened over the last 15 years is just the sheer variety of data and the opportunities for creating data has exponentially increased. 15 years back, probably data was primarily an enterprise phrase, and you're looking at it only from the point of view of how can a company collect data and how can it kind of use it in its business. But what has happened now, and as Murugavel so colorfully illustrated, in the consumer world, data is a big deal now. A lot of decisions that consumers make revolve around data. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on each of these three segments, which is consumer, enterprise, and governments, right? So these three segments, I think, are fundamentally getting transformed in the way how they are harnessing analytics and how they are applying it, primarily digital data, how they are applying it to the decisions that they make, and how it is making an impact in our everyday lives as well as the opportunities before each of these nation states. So the consumers, I think, again, mobile and social that Siddharth was talking about earlier are very fundamental shifts in how we interact with the rest of the society. And mobile, in fact, some other conversation we were having before this, 15 years back, mobile was a luxury product, right? So when it was launched and it was only available in the urban locations and it was primarily more vanity rather than any utility because unless the network goes up and enough people own the device, whom are you going to call, right? But today, it's a great leveler. It's available everyone in every realm of the society, and people who are not necessarily literate in the traditional sense of the word are big users of mobile. So what this has also meant is there is a fundamental shift in the way society interacts. As educators, I'm sure I keep talking about this anecdote. When we were in university, most of our learning outside of our classrooms was talking to our peers, interacting in the hostels, spending hours together without any device or technology, interacting with people and learning from them. And today, I think if you talk to any marketer, talk to anyone who deals with young people, tells you it's very hard to get the undistracted or undivided attention of theirs because each of them have multiple devices and the time they spend with their devices probably takes precedence over the time they spend with other humans, and it starts very early. I have two boys who are kind of relatively young, and I can tell you, even at 8 years old, they're doing exactly this, and I shudder to think how it's going to be when they're 25 and whether they can interact with humans. So the reason I'm bringing out all this is it's not just a business thing when we talk about analytics or digital. Digital has become a mainstream part of our life. And people are becoming, in fact, there is a movement called quantified self in some of the Western markets where there are people who measure everything they do. In fact, some of my friends make fun of me as one of those people. And I have a measure for how much sleep I get every day. I have a measure for how many steps I walked. I have a measure for all kinds of things that I am doing. And I can tell you pretty much down to 15 minutes of my life for the last 3 years where I was and whether I was active or not active because I carry a device all the time on me. And I'm not even a business or I'm not even a government. I'm just a consumer. But I want to measure myself and I want my data. And increasingly, this is a trend. There are people who want to know how influential am I in a social network, and they spend a lot of time building their reputation inside a social network because that's the data that they want to analyze and that's the data they want to own. So these are very unique changes which we have witnessed never before in the history of computing, and it's hard to even look ahead in terms of where it's going to lead. But we can tell you there are fundamental changes that are happening in the consumer world. Moving on to enterprises, finally, most enterprises have, or some of the enterprises have the consumer-facing business, and when we talk to them and when we serve them, they're all telling us, look, what used to work 10 years back no longer works. And much of the reason for that change is digital. So consumers who used to watch television and we could just sponsor programs, we could do television advertising, we could somehow have our content being brought into that space, don't even consume content and or they don't consume it in the traditional way through television, and they are now consuming it in very different digital devices, and we need to be able to understand how to make this shift. We meet banks which tell us we are an old people bank. The people we bank with are all people who are 35 or older, and we just don't know how to engage with this new generation of millennials and whatever I'm sure there are multiple tags attached to all these people, but let's say the younger people, and how do we even understand how they think, how do we connect with them? And to do this, their traditional analytics, which used to look at their internal databases, look at their transactions and make sense of it, no longer. I wanted to share this excitement with you in terms of the future is really bright in terms of being able to harness data. And as long as we interpret it the right way and we stay honest, we have great ways to leverage analytics and make an impact to our everyday life. Thank you.
Thanks, Venkat. That was a good summary of how all walks of life. You can be a consumer, you can be a part of the enterprise, you can be a part of making the government or creating government. Whichever way you look at it, you're going to be touched by analytics in some way. Interesting to note the quantified self that you said, which is there everywhere. Like, wherever we go, we are in a hurry to give data about yourselves today. There is so much that is available, and someone who is shrewd is going to use this for their advantage, be it as a part of enterprise or government. In fact, I do recollect in my profession, management consulting, we constantly are scared that what will happen tomorrow. Analytics is going to singularly change the way management consulting is going to be, done in the next few years. So very good thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And if you want to know more about Venkat, you can turn to page 39. The last of the speakers in the panel is somebody who is not only an innovator, has actually used this innovation effectively. Ashish Dikshit, you will not find his profile, so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes introducing Ashish, who's to the extreme left on the stage. Ashish tends to call himself a serial entrepreneur, and that he is. It started somewhere with the WebSphere, which we all know, and which is now more than $1 billion asset for IBM. He moved on to Model N, which is an application-based company that is currently listed in NASDAQ. And in the recent past, he has been with GreenPatch, and some of the youngsters here would know GreenPatch. It is the #1 game in the virtual world still, and a part of the Walt Disney Media right now. At the moment, Ashish is a part of Buzziers, which is a partner company with SIFI. And right now, he's doing something in the education space, where in a platform, he's trying to bring in the administrative, educational, and also the sharing aspects of everything that happens in an educational institution together in one platform, which even the Ministry of Human Resource and Development has acknowledged, and in their Shala Darpan program, they have actually openly acknowledged his contribution. So we're going to hear from Ashish, Dr. Ashish Dikshit, in terms of what are his views, in terms of how digital technology is going to shape and impact businesses, particularly perhaps education as we go along. Over to you, Ashish.
Thank you so much. Like the introduction, my life for the last 25 years has been building products. 20 of those went in US, and a couple years back I started doing things in India, so that's for Make in India. And it's a digital initiative, so we are right on. So a couple years back in 2007, we were working on building games, and Facebook had come out with a new platform. So we thought we should try and see what we should do there. And incidentally, we did well. We built a game called GreenPatch, and it grew to be the largest social gaming property in the world, 30 million people. A lot of people told us that, look, you cannot do it. There's Nintendo, there's Sony, so all you've played is Snake and Ladder, so what can you do with it? So we did pretty well. Finally, we learned a lot, because during those years, from 2007 till 10, Facebook was going something between 40 million users to 1 billion users. So how does collaboration work in a social world? What kind of technologies come together? How do people react to that? What makes it happen? Why did Facebook grow so fast? What kind of applications work in them? It's quite a bit about how technology touches lives of people and bring things together. So after I left that thing in 2010, we started Buzziers.
And Buzziers was intended to be, if Facebook has done something in social, and if you look at people everywhere around us, they're associated with education. They're either getting educated while going to colleges, schools, or they have kids and then they're in another ride for the next 20 years when their kids are going through it, and then probably grandkids. So they're associated with education all through their lives. And what is the single platform that one goes to for education? If I ask anybody, I don't think I have an answer. But it touches lives of everybody, and there's no place to go for it. So that's what took us to build Buzziers. The foundation, so this key buzzword goes around saying SMAC, so the social mobility and all that. So for us, collaboration was the foundation. For any business to work, there has to be collaboration. It isn't about any application. So if you're looking at financials, if you're looking at your grades, if you're preparing for IIT, you're preparing for your 12th math, or anything like that, whatever you're doing, there's always collaboration in it. It could be you're collaborating in your sales team in your organization. So it could be just anywhere. So collaboration is just an aspect of it, how a solution comes together. And mobility, any platform today cannot expect to be on the web. It has to be mobile, it has to be on tablet, it has to be responsive. So these attributes have to be part of a platform. So around 4 years back, we started building it along those lines. The other thing we wanted to innovate was to bring together a solution. So if you look at how people implement business solutions, the cycle typically is one takes, say, SAP as a platform or something along those lines, Oracle or Siebel or PeopleSoft or something, and then one looks at adding the features, takes a server, puts it into that, and then makes it live and people use it. Now, all this work that happened was done for only one person to use, one organization to use, and there is no way you can bring together all the customizations in the world in one place. So what if we could do that every customization that happens could be available in one place? That would be a lot of power to bring together and bring down eventual value to people in terms of when it runs in cloud. You don't need to buy the servers like the current generation runs, that you rent out machines and you go use it. So it's a software as a service. And you further go ahead and add your customizations, but you also make it available to others. Because what you get back in return is features from everybody. So over a very short period of time, there's convergence of what can you do, because everything is done. It tends towards that in a very short time. So we did this part of our effort towards education. So we built a platform, and it is a collaborative platform, and it has applications, more than 50 of them. And it works in villages, for example, where there's no connectivity. So it can work on a 2G, or it could work on a dongle, or even using a USB drive. But people who run institutions of, say, 200 institutions in villages can get up-to-the-minute information in the cloud. And that's value, because they could never assume it would happen for them. You take examples like ITM, for example, is a big institution chain, and they invested for years in building a solution, and then they said, we would go with you, because we'll never catch up, and it's not going to work out. So we've tried this in many areas, and broadly, over a period of time, we've built solutions that go into what anybody is running a whole system can see on their fingertips, information using analytics, what is happening in their organization. So in a particular location, that accountant opened a voucher, you could look at it by the minute. So now take it to the next level. If all the partners' implementations that are happening could be happening in one location, as opposed to on separate machines. It's just happening in one location. So it becomes that when you do that in education and you have collaboration, people are engaging on applications in this cloud. And that's your platform that comes together. So this happens in ERP, it happens in every vertical at some point. So that's a journey we started on, and it's been a fun ride. We get lots of good experiences in what we see. And to open up new doors on how we can see what can come together in just a short time. Also, it gives a platform where any kind of devices connect with it, and all services start converging. So the solution starts getting complete in a fairly short time. So that's been a great journey, and it's going great.
Thank you so much. I do work in the education space, and education perhaps is the last bastion that technology has not entered for many, many years. So it's really glad to know that finally we have digital technologies in education institutions as well. And I'm sure they're going to make a change that is going to be so lasting that a sector that was not touched by technology for many years. And I would want to share one of my experiences with a university that is the third oldest university in the English-speaking world. They've been around for nearly 650 years. And it was a very interesting conversation that we were having with them. They said, for so many centuries, we have not changed anything. We almost offer the courses we used to offer in 1500s and 1600s. And now we are worried that it may not continue that way. So after so many centuries, they are worried that the university format in which they kind of discover or invented, how that's going to be disrupted because technology, particularly in the form of MOOCs, is offering things free of cost, what they used to charge multiple $1,000s. So I'm sure digital technology is going to make a lasting impact on education, and you are in the, in creating that. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. So ladies and gentlemen, we had very interesting conversation from across, and I have a few questions to ask the panel. And I would request, if you have any questions that you have in mind, if you want to ask any one of us, please feel free to stand up. I'm not able to see many of you from here. May not be by design, but literally they have kept the audience in the dark, so we'll try and figure out. But if you can stand up and ask a question, we'll be happy to answer. But while you do that, I have a question for you, Siddharth, and perhaps Murugavel can also chip in. Is there something that has not changed? All of us talked about things that are changing and things that are going to be different, almost scaring me. Like, is there, and Venkat, you also, is there anything at all that is not going to change, that are so fundamental that when we are getting into this digital technologies and things that are changing, I want to know something that are not changing?
People getting married won't change. People getting married won't change.
You're sure?
Yeah. It's a fundamental need of the human being. As long as humanity exists, people need to come together. So how are they going to find a life partner? That will change. It's been changing. We're talking about in our side. From online, today it's become mobile, that has been evolving. And, so
you're saying the basic needs don't change.
Yeah, basic needs won't change. The methods and means of getting things done or how you do things will change. The exercise is very important, whether you're using, kind of, something that wearables to tell you that you walk 10,000 steps and all those things. If you every day exercise 1 hour, you don't need all those things. Only people who are not regular in all those, you need all those things, whether you need a wearables or otherwise you are doing regular exercise. We don't need all the wearable tell you walk today 8,000 steps, 2,000 steps tomorrow to go on out.
Absolutely.
If I can just add another aspect to it. When I went to school, business school, one of the professors, when we asked a similar question to him, saying, you've been teaching for so long, what has not changed? And what will always be true? So he said, if you go back, all business started with trading, and all of trading is simply buy low, sell high, right? So that's never going to go away. If you do it the other way, you're going to lose money. If you do it the right way, you'll make money. And so there are some very fundamental aspects of, even when we talk about digital marketing, finally all of marketing is understanding your consumer. You can accommodate with different media, different aspects, different frameworks and all of that. But if you don't know who your consumer is, if you don't know what they want, you're not addressing that need.
So I think from my perspective, it is probably what is not changing is the resistance to change. And the companies or the startups or the people who are not going to accept it, right? Because this is inherent, right? None of us like to change. Right? You just don't wake up every morning and say, all right, let me not do what I used to do before, right? And I do. So that is probably one of the biggest impediments that we see when everything else around you is changing. But from a systems or a technical perspective, if you talk about the enterprises who have a lot of legacy investments, it is difficult for them to change. Not that they may not even want to change. So what is happening is, given that people have embraced this new storm that is brewing around them, right, and you don't know what else it's going to bring, and it's all optimistic, it's all positive, right? So nothing that I think the panel is saying here is pessimistic. This is all for good. But what is happening is the incremental funding, when you go to the organizations, right, is actually happening at the edge of the enterprise. So it is happening in these newer technologies. It doesn't mean that the legacy stuff goes away. So I'm not sure if we talked about mainframes, yeah, right? Mainframes have been there, and there are still about 1.2 million or 1.4 million transactions running per second on mainframe, right? Your banking, your ATM, your hotel reservations, your airline reservations. If there is anything that you did today, chances are it used a mainframe. So there are certain things that are still there. It's not because they don't want to change it, because it's embedded in the system so deep, like the von Neumann architecture, right, which was in 1969. That hasn't changed. So unless you go to these neuromorphic or non-silicon type architectures, there are certain things that will remain the same, right? So that's why some of the things that you see don't change as well, right?
Thank you so much. So glad to know that some things don't change. In a lighter sense, I do work with schools and educational institutions a lot. And when I ask them, like, what has changed in this classroom, because classrooms hardly changed. A blackboard has become a green board, and later it became a white board. But what is written on the board and what the teacher teaches, either IDED means like, Khan Academy, whatever, what they teach and what is being learned has not changed. So in a sense, the fundamentals are not going to change. Restaurants don't change. Finding a restaurant will change because of digital technologies. So interesting to hear that. So any questions from the audience? We are happy to take that now. And I would request anybody who's having a question to first introduce themselves. And if there is any specific question to anybody, say that, please. I'm not able to see anything, so unless somebody says, I'll not be able to see.
All right. So I'll talk about unstructured data that you talked about from Watson perspective. So I'll give an example, and I'm not medical or professional by practice, but I just learned some of this stuff. So when you talk about, let's say, cancer treatments, there is a protein known as K53. And that is responsible for what is known as apoptosis, which is like killing the cells. So cancer, as you know, is uncontrolled growth of cells. And there is a protein which is K53, which is responsible for killing them or keeping that under control. So in 50% of the cases in cancer, what happens is this K53 gets deactivated, right? And there are people who are working on researches to support a process known as phosphorylation, which is like adding a phosphate molecule to this particular protein to get it activated so that it can start controlling the cells. And these specific proteins which do this phosphorylation are known as kinases, right? I just had to study this, by the way, so, right? So to give you an example, what happened was there was a decade of research by a team of researchers who identified about 7 of these kinases, okay, in 10 years. And we gave this to Watson with old data for about a few months. And it identified 9 of kinases in few months. So if you talk about a kinase, there are 70,000 research papers written on kinase. So which means if I'm a researcher, you can imagine going through that 70,000 pieces of information, unstructured data, all of it, to identify and then come up with a kinase molecule and say, this is what you should try. So what the researchers across the world took about 10 years to identify, like I think 7 or 11 of them. Watson identified 9 of them, and 7 of them matched what these guys had come up with. So my point is, that these kinds of technologies, so in the world, there's a lot of unstructured data, and I'll come to that in a second. But these kinds of technologies are helping the humanity right? Helping cure the diseases, the stem cell research, right? Everything is possible, or even the vaccination in sub-Saharan Africa, which is reducing deaths of children under 5 or neonates and things like that. And if you talk about countries like Rwanda or Ghana or Kenya, there are a lot of these technologies, including mobile, for awareness and education, that are helping save lives of humans. Right? So when I talk about mobile, right, or when Ashish talks about his company, this is extremely critical to the overall goodness of or growth for humanity. One additional comment on unstructured data. So right now what is happening is 90% of the world data is unstructured. This is the Facebooks, the 72 hours of video that gets uploaded on YouTube every minute, right? The 3 billion photographs on Instagram, right? The tweets that are happening in millions. And before, we as companies, right, were used to structured data. So the relational databases like the DB2 from IBM or Oracle or Microsoft SQL and things like that used to hold that. So now what is changing largely is how do you analyze, or how do you take into account this unstructured data, marry it with the structured component, and kind of come up with an analysis or advanced analytics in the case of artificial intelligence and things like that to help humanity or people, right, to grow and things like that.
You don't want the data also.
Yeah, correct. Same thing is happening in smarter cities place. So now countries, and including like our Prime Minister himself, right, have identified like 100 smarter cities. But the reason is that they want to make sure that the cities are sustainable, which has got good health care, employment, and things like that.
Yeah, you are, yeah.
My name is Mayank Gupta. I am an education entrepreneur. There are a lot of us today in the audience who are from education institutions. A couple of you spoke about technologies which are very exciting to hear. Especially Venkat for analytics and Ashish for education applications. So I wanted to understand how an education institution can on ground use the technologies which you have developed to improve the processes existing in the organization. And so using analytics or using applications, how can we improve our day-to-day pains of dealing with a large amount of data and processes?
So one of the key things we do when we work with institutions is we see institutions and the ones, not just the ones who are starting off, but the ones who are extremely well funded. They have disparate solutions that are all disconnected. So bringing them together becomes a big exercise that they do, and they don't have a unified solution. So in what we do, we bring forward a unified solution, be it for a location or for thousands of them. So our solutions run in places which have 12,000 institutions, 8,000 institutions, 200 institutions, anything. So the key part is that can you bring together something that's integrated as well as across locations and always live in all applications they do use. And if you can get to that point, then that's what we do. And largely because of the way we are by configuring the products, we can end up with making it go live in a really short time of 2 to 3 months. And we've done this multiple times. So the gratification is faster, the cost is cheaper, and at the same time, the solution is complete. So in our world, we look at it like that, that we measure ourselves with this as if we are able to achieve it or not.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the digitization of education allows for a lot of analysis to be done. We don't directly work with the education sector, but we do work with learning groups within enterprises. And what we are finding out is they all want to know how do we drive engagement? How do we ensure people who start a particular course go on to finish it? And I'm able to kind of find out whether they actually gain from this. And how do I even glean some unstructured data which tells me they have now learned a particular topic which we are trying to kind of teach them. So I think there is a lot of opportunity. We also met publishers who are now saying, I'm now delivering content instead of a book, a physical book in electronic devices, and maybe I have now newer opportunities. I can find out, is there a particular chapter that people typically stumble and spend a lot of time in? Is there a particular visual or a graphic that we have put that they don't seem to understand, and it seems to take the most time to clear? And is there a particular pace at which people read a book? Does everyone read it in 1 day, 3 days? Or how does distribution work in some particular area? So very, very interesting and newer science being applied. Once you digitize all the data, once it's not a black box saying all these students went in, the professor went in, and we don't know what happened inside, they all came out, right? So you're not getting to a digital point where there is a live recording of the class. There are maybe digital technology, whether it's like Kindles or other forms of tablets available which measure the interaction. And so once you start generating all this digital data, it is possible to analyze and then focus on what is the outcome we want, and are we lining up things the right way to get to that outcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a wonderful session on digital business and technology. We got a lot of insight on Make in India Digital.